Okay, everyone, good evening. My name is Jessica Lax. I'm with Disability Rights New Jersey. I am the Youth Practice Group Advocate on the Youth Practice Group team, and I work with students and young adults as well as individuals all the way up until 21. And I'm here with my colleague, Jana.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jana Scheinman. I'm the managing attorney of the employment unit, and I work together with Jesse on our transition initiatives. So we
Okay.
have a little bit of housekeeping that I just wanted to get into before we get into the agenda. This webinar is being recorded, and after the presentation, it will be shared on with everyone on our website, along with the PowerPoint presentation that we are using. Your audio and your video have been muted, and your video has been turned off. You can use computer audio or call in to be able to listen to it, but we do ask that you hold all of your questions until the end of the presentation. You can use your chat to reach out to all the panelists and the attendees. And if you're looking to download the chat, there should be an option in the chat box to save chat so you can get answers to any of the questions that are answered in the chat, either by us or by others. Subtitles have been put on for this webinar, and they are available. So if you are looking to use the subtitles at the bottom of the screen, you should see an option that says show more and show subtitles. If you have any accessibility concerns, you can reach out to our organization and we can get you a copy of the presentation with the subtitles. So a little bit about Disability Rights New Jersey. We answer the call of those in need advocating for the rights of individuals with disabilities statewide. We are a private nonprofit agency that is funded with private donations and with grants from both the federal and the state government. We are New York Jersey's designated protection and advocacy agency, which means we were designated by the governor to serve individuals with disabilities. And it's our mission to preserve the human, civil, and legal rights of people with disabilities, empowering equality through persistence, awareness, and expertise. We're able to provide legal assistance to individuals with disabilities in areas such as abuse and neglect, discrimination, voting rights, access to services and supports, and employment. In addition to our individual representation, we have the unique authority under our federal mandate to go and investigate allegations of abuse and neglect in nursing homes, in group homes, in care settings, in service settings, anywhere where that services individuals with disabilities. This presentation is also funded in partnership with the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, which is the part of the New Jersey Bar Association and provides no-cost educational programs for individuals in New Jersey to help them really understand the laws and what's going on. Their mission is to foster an increased awareness, appreciation, and knowledge of law and the legal systems among New Jersey residents, and they serve as a statewide resource for law-related education to the public. Through this, they provide opportunities for attorneys to serve the public through foundation programs and foundation grants, similar to the grant that we have right now that is funding our presentation. And they seek to foster professionalism and pride in the profession of law through public service.
Right. So to get started with our objectives today, we're going to be identifying self-advocacy and why it's important to transition. There will be a brief overview of laws relevant to transition age students. We're going to introduce our new planning tool for transition age students called ASPYIR and how to identify your transition needs. We're going to talk about what it means to be an advocate for yourself as a person with a disability. And we're going to provide suggestions on how to support students as they self-advocate. Finally, and you'll hear me say this quite a lot, I might change color, self-advocacy is a lifelong skill. We will talk about that at length. Next slide, please. So, what is self-advocacy? Well, self-advocacy is expressing your thoughts, feelings, needs, and wants in whatever ways you are able. Self-advocacy is about taking a person-centered approach to our lives. We want to make sure that self-advocacy is known for the people who are involved in self-advocacy making the final decision for themselves. And of course, part of self-advocacy is being comfortable saying, I don't know, and asking questions. Next slide, please. Janet, sorry, you're muted.
I know, I was trying to figure out how to unmute because I'm sharing the screen. I apologize for that. So there are several laws that we do want you to be aware of that really do impact the ability to get transition services and to have impact on discrimination and prohibit discrimination in the workplace, in living situations, in schools. And the first we want to talk about is one I'm sure you're all very familiar with, and that's the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. And this is a national civil rights law that protects the rights of people with disabilities and fights against discrimination of them. This is also in partnership with the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And I'm sure most of you have heard Section 504. Section 504. Section 504 is part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and that's what prohibits the discrimination on the basis of a disability in any setting that receives any public assistance or public funding. This is why you have a 504 plan for individuals who are in high schools, who are in middle schools. This is why the doctor's offices are not able to discriminate against people with disabilities and make their buildings inaccessible, even before the passing of the ADA. We also have the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act of 2014, which really does expand the rights of the Rehabilitation Act and helps provide additional assistance for individuals who are seeking career services from the state VR agencies or the vocation rehabilitation agencies. This is where we get that the VR agencies are allowed to encourage eligible individuals to pursue advanced training in the fields of science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, including computer science, law, medicine, or business. So if anybody tells you you can't go for a master's degree or a bachelor's or a doctorate degree because you have a disability, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act of 2014 says, no, you're allowed to, and we encourage you because people are able to get these additional degrees and being able to get those jobs. Those are the laws at the federal level. At the state level, we have the laws against discrimination, which prohibits discrimination and bias-based harassment based on many protected classes in employment, housing, and places of public accommodation. And one of those protected classes is whether or not you have a disability. So if somebody is discriminating against you and you're in a job, at a school, at a restaurant, at the library, this is where the laws against discrimination for New Jersey come into play. And so we'll talk about those a little bit and how this all really impacts, because as Jesse said in the overview, self-advocacy is a lifelong skill. So it goes beyond transition services and will impact individuals in employment and housing. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later.
Why is self-advocacy important? Well, there's a variety of different reasons, but we've narrowed it down to 5 main reasons for the purpose of this slide. Otherwise, we might be here all night. First and foremost, self-advocacy helps us build confidence within ourselves. It increases our independence. It allows us to practice the idea that even though people have disabilities, they are still allowed and able to practice independence and really decide what it is that they want for their lives and their future. Number 3, understanding what we need. It is very important that you have a reason why you want to go ahead and do things in education, in employment, in independent living. There needs to be an understanding of what's behind why we need what we need. Reason number 4, increasing the ability to think for ourselves. Again, this goes kind of hand in hand with item number 2, increasing independence. Again, you're practicing the skill of thinking for yourselves. That doesn't just start when you're transition aged and it doesn't end after your transition age. It really continues throughout your life. And finally, number 5, taking control of our own futures as much as possible is a huge part of self-advocacy. Next slide, please. So how can I determine what it is that I want? If I'm the student in this situation, the person advocating for myself, I might say, think about what it is that you want. First and foremost, you have to really give yourself some time to say, okay, what is going to serve me best? What do I like? What do I dislike? Really give yourself the opportunity to think about that. If it helps you, I often recommend to students that you write your answers down if that helps you remember. Some people really like this process, other people do not. It's really an individualized decision. And finally, practice answering questions with explanations. We've all heard of your standard yes or no answers, not really giving much detail beyond one word. But when I'm working with students who are transition aged, it is something that I try to focus on. Tell us why you answered a question in a specific manner. Give us an explanation, give us more of a description as to what you were thinking besides the standard yes or no. This really helps build your self-advocacy skills. Next slide, please. Identifying strengths, needs, and preferences. For those of you who have read IEPs before or have IEPs yourself, whether you are the student or the parent, strengths, needs, and preferences are very common words within the IEP world. So it is important for a self-advocate and a person engaging in self-advocacy to practice identifying these three things. The student should first ask what they are good at. So this is done in many ways, including asking, what classes do you do well in, and what classes do you enjoy? Do you have any hobbies or activities that you excel at or want to focus on? What does the student need to succeed? Breaking it down further, this means how will you progress toward your annual goals every year to work toward your post-secondary goals? You'll remember that annual goals and post-secondary goals are discussed in the IEP. They should be very much connected with each other. Your annual goals should be actively propelling you towards your post-secondary goals. And the next part of this piece is, what supports will you need in order to succeed? And then finally, the last portion of this is asking, does the student feel as though they are headed in a positive, realistic direction? So what that means is, are you taking classes that will prepare you for what you think you might want to do after high school? Are those classes something that's related to your interests and where you think you might end up after high school? Or do they not really relate to what it is that you think you might want to do? That's part of it. And then the second part within this piece is identifying whether or not you feel like you're being forced into a direction that you are not interested in, or a direction that does not support your goals. So you really want to make sure that all of these three pieces are addressed. Next slide, please. So in order to identify areas related to strengths, needs, and preferences, we have to also identify the areas where students may need to grow and improve. So you'll notice that the slides kind of interchange between talking to students and parents. This slide is again directed towards the student. When working with the student, I encourage students to ask themselves things like, I need help with blank. Things I could get better at are blank. And then also everyone's favorite question, not really, blank makes me feel uncomfortable. We have to be able to also remember that part of working through self-advocacy, especially during transition age, is identifying those things, those situations, what have you, that are going to make us feel uncomfortable. All of these pieces need to be addressed in a student's transition plan because they play a very pivotal role in determining what types of evaluations and services will benefit students as they move towards and through young adulthood. So evaluations and assessments could include assistive technology evaluations, vocational assessments, occupational therapy, PT, and speech evaluations. It's really supposed to be individualized and dependent on the student. Next slide, please. And so here we have our fantastic, amazing, insert awesome synonym here, our new ASPYIR planning tool for transition age students. This stands for Accessing Strategies to Prepare Youth for Independence and Responsibility. It is a questionnaire that creates a document which helps students in preparing to graduate high school and start life after high school. And each report is individualized and person-centered, which goes back to the idea that self-advocacy is crucial within transition planning for students. And every report comes with a list of community agencies and organizations that provide additional supports for students with disabilities. Next slide, please. The main goal of ASPYIR is that it allows students to speak at their IEP meetings and develop the transition plan within their IEP. Now, this is incredibly important. The planning tool does not take the place of the transition plan in a student's IEP. It is serving as the starting point to visualize your plan, which then gets placed in your IEP itself. It is not in place of the transition plan within the IEP. It is an accessible planning tool that allows you to then develop the plan within your IEP. I, as the youth practice group advocate, am available to complete the transition planning tool with students. But ASPYIR is available online, and you can access it through our website. And there we have the link. Next slide, please. So to break it down further, ASPYIR has 3 main sections. They focus on education, employment, and independent living. We ask that all of the students answer the questions on their own or with assistance, but that their final answers be their own responses. I know it's tempting, but in the spirit of true self-advocacy, please encourage your students to answer the questions independently. That means that the results will be more truthful and accurate to what they really want and need for themselves within their self-advocacy and transition journeys. So again, the main sections are education, employment, and independent living. The questions are presented in such a way that every student's transition planning tool will end up being unique to their needs and their preferences. You're going to be asked about educational accommodations that you might need, employment accommodations that you might need, independent living skills that you think would really benefit you in terms of how you envision your future and what it looks like. For example, where do you think you would like to live? What skills do you think you might need to help you become a more independent individual, doing things on your own and to the best of your ability? So these are some of the sections that the student will be going through and answering questions based on their strengths, needs, and preferences. And like the previous slide said before, there is also a section on community agencies and organizations that are specific to helping students with disabilities in the community in different ways. Next slide, please. So whenever I'm working with students, I talk a lot about taking charge of your own path. Now, at the front of this, it sounds like a very lofty idea, because we're saying, okay, take charge, when, well, in fact, these are high school students and young adults. So while they can't take charge of everything, they can start to practice gaining that experience so that eventually, as they get older, they feel comfortable taking charge of more and more within their own life. So I always talk about keeping a few things in mind when you are working on self-advocacy and planning and charting your own path. First, your wants and needs will change as you experience life. This is true for everyone. Few people stay on the same path. It is very common for all of us, no matter, you know, what our situation is, that sometimes a path changes and you take a new route. Very common. Third, make sure you as the student are staying in the driver's seat. Again, you're really practicing self-advocacy. You're continuing to gain skills and confidence in self-advocating for yourself by staying in the driver's seat. And finally, and this is the most important piece that I try to hit home, you as the student are the one person guaranteed to always be at the table when planning and moving through your life. This is especially true if you have a big support system that involves more than just family members. Supporters change throughout and over time. But you as the student are the one person guaranteed to always be there at the center. So you should have the most practice understanding and trying to get across what you want and need in life. Next slide, please. So for supporters, what does it mean to support self-advocacy? This means helping the student to understand their interest, encouraging them to pursue their goals. It is about being there to assist them with the decision making, not making the decision for them. Being there to assist them with the process of determining what the end goal is, what the final choice is, not actually making that final choice for them. Next slide, please. Okay, so it's only fair that if we're talking about positive self-advocacy supports, we should also show the other side. So these are some examples of what is not supportive of self-advocacy. I have heard some of these before myself when working in the field. For example, my child will never be able to advocate for themselves is not supportive of self-advocacy. However, instead, if you're trying to be supportive of self-advocacy, you might turn it around a little bit and ask, what assistance do they need in order to be able to advocate for themselves? Another not very supportive self-advocacy statement is, it's easier if I just do it for them. Well, again, yes, we know it might be easier if you do things for a student, but instead, self-advocacy asks that we want to try and help them and make it easier. But if they're not learning to speak for themselves, then they're not really practicing self-advocacy, are they? And then finally, they just aren't sure they know what they want, so I decide for them. Again, if we're practicing self-advocacy, one way to do this is asking yourself, can you help them understand their decision and options instead of trying to do it for them? If you try and help them understand the options, it is moving towards a more positive reflection of what self-advocacy can truly be. Next slide, please. So again, supporting self-advocacy is person-centered, especially when it comes to things that are related to transition. We mentioned on the previous slide that some people who are supporting students are hesitant about self-advocacy because they're worried that a student needs a lot of extra assistance. We want you to know that self-advocacy is still self-advocacy even when a student has assistance. It still qualifies as self-advocacy. A supportive example of this is when a student becomes more comfortable asking teachers and supporters for assistance in or out of the classroom. Now here, the process of self-advocacy is within this example in two ways. First of all, we talked about gaining confidence in the earlier slides as part of self-advocacy. So we've identified that the student is getting more comfortable. If they approach a situation with a feeling of comfort, they're going to hopefully have a more positive outcome. So they are comfortable asking for assistance in or out of a classroom setting. They're still going to do as much as they can for themselves, but they feel good about asking for help. They feel good about seeking it out on their own. Next slide, please. How to assist a student further with self-advocacy. Examples of this are doing your best to have ongoing discussions with the student about what they feel they can and cannot do. And then as a supporter, you might ask yourself, do you agree or disagree with them? And of course, why? Why is it that you feel strongly that they're right? Or why is it that you feel strongly that there's a bigger disagreement there? How can you help them understand their strengths? This is a small question and yet takes a lot in terms of unpacking. Strengths may be very visible on the surface, and then some strengths may take a while to uncover. So that's important to note as well. Also, if the student has significant support needs, what are ways in which you can try and work with them to establish some self-advocacy? Again, we're going to go back to this concept that self-advocacy is still self-advocacy even when you need to ask for assistance. So in that vein, quote, small actions and demonstrations of self-advocacy are just as important as, quote, big actions. That's exactly what it means. Even if you are identifying that a student is able to advocate for themselves in a small way, that is still just as important as if they're going to advocate for themselves in a bigger way. Next slide, please. What systems can be put in place to help the student? Here are some examples. If we are supporting students as much as possible, then we want to focus on the skills that they do well independently. Within this category, you're going to want to consider a question such as, how do these skills improve the student's self-advocacy abilities? And examples of this skills process might mean list making to follow a schedule to complete tasks, or breaking down those tasks into manageable chunks. So again, we've identified a skill that the student can do independently. We've questioned, how do the skills improve the self-advocacy abilities, and we've provided examples of practicing that skills and making it into an actionable item. Next slide, please. Support network. What can you do to help the student prepare? You may request assistive technology evals if the student does not communicate through verbal speech, and/or other evaluations as appropriate. Make a point of regularly talking to the students about their interests and needs. And again, this will improve comfort in the student being able to make their own decisions. Next slide, please. Self-advocacy has many different parts, and dignity of risk should not go unnoticed when it comes to the bigger idea of what self-advocacy truly means and what it can give people. So dignity of risk is exactly what it sounds like. People with disabilities are often sheltered and not given the opportunity to try new things, especially when opportunities could have a negative outcome. So dignity of risk is giving a person the ability to have the dignity to be able to take risks. This provides people with the opportunity to learn from taking chances and making mistakes, just like everyone else, disability or not. We all learn from our mistakes and our successes, but to do so, we need to take that risk. So again, allowing students in this case to be able to take risks and learn from their successes and failures. Sometimes we need to help someone to take a chance. And even if we're helping someone take a chance, that person who is being assisted should still be allowed the dignity of taking that risk. Next slide, please. Again, I don't think I'm a different color yet, but transition and self-advocacy are lifelong skills. Transition and self-advocacy certainly do not end in high school. Transition in high school is designed to help prepare students for life outside of secondary education, but continues long after someone turns 21. This may include college or training, or transitioning right into the workforce. Doesn't matter. Self-advocacy will be used in every single setting you can imagine. Next slide, please. So if we're talking about going from high school to continued education, when students are in high school, they have more support from teachers, staff, and parents. After high school, they have much more independence and are expected to do things like request disability accommodations in college, follow a syllabus, use office hours with instructors or professors, meet deadlines, and develop skills independently, and really take better control and charge of their own schedule. Next slide, please. If you're going into the workplace, self-advocacy is still a skill that you are practicing. In the workplace, employees are expected to demonstrate even more independence, communicating with one's boss and colleagues for one, asking for reasonable accommodations or assistance at work if they choose to disclose, meeting deadlines and developing skills independently, and deciding to work with a job coach or on one's own, their choice, based on their wants and needs. Next slide, please. In the space of independent living, self-advocacy becomes very important because possibly transitioning from living with your family to living on your own, even if you are in a group home setting, can be very intimidating. And this means that you need to feel at least a little bit comfortable doing the following things: being able to speak up for yourself, and in particular, especially if you are in a group setting, learning to protect your rights with the staff. This can be very tricky, and all the more reason why building self-advocacy skills and becoming more confident in advocating for oneself is very important. The more you are comfortable with self-advocacy, the more you can do your best to keep yourself safe in some of these situations that, again, can be intimidating and difficult. Everyone learns new life skills regardless of where they live. So a student's independent living plan section might identify that they want to continue living with their family, and that is their choice. That's what they've decided. However, they can still engage in practicing and learning more independent living skills to make themselves feel good about what it is they want to pursue in this next chapter of their life, regardless of whether they're living on their own or with family. It's really person-centered and dependent on what the student wants. Next slide, please. Again, being your own self-advocate is one of the strongest skills you will have. We really want to make sure that as much as we are able and as much as we feel comfortable, that people with and without disabilities really focus on the fact that self-advocacy is going to help them live their best lives possible. And self-advocacy looks different for everyone, and that is okay. But the more self-advocacy you have in your life, and when supporting other people and the lives of those you love, self-advocacy becomes very key to people being as independent and as strong as they can be, regardless of ability levels. Self-advocacy is important for everyone. Next slide.
And with that, we are going to open it up for any questions that you all may have who are here watching the presentation. We do have a couple of questions as you guys are typing it into the chat that came in before the seminar that we want to make sure got addressed here. So the first question, Jesse, is, should my child take the ASPYIR Transition Tool every year starting at age 14?
You can take the ASPYIR Transition Planning Tool every year if you would like. It really depends on the student's situation. If you feel, I should rephrase this in the spirit of true self-advocacy. If you and your student feel that taking the planning tool every year will really benefit the students' ongoing process of moving into young adulthood, then that's fine. Some people will not need to take it every year, and their paths, if you will, won't change as much. Others can and should feel free to take it every year based on whether or not they're wants and needs change. They've realized that they want to identify new skills. It really depends on the individual situation.
The next question that was sent in before the meeting was, my student needs help taking the planning tool. What do I do if they need assistance?
If your student needs assistance taking ASPYIR, please feel free to work with me. I am the YPG advocate, and I really focus on working with transition age students. So I would be more than happy to walk them through the tool, in whatever ways best suit their needs. I'm not going to, give them the answers. I'm going to steer them, in the right direction in terms of just being able to navigate the planning tool, as best they can. They're going to basically give me the answers that they choose so that the plan is very much individualized and person-centered.
Question we have in the chat is the information used in the ASPYIR confidential, or does the information get provided to another organization or agency?
The information within the ASPYIR planning tool is confidential. That said, one of the main uses of the results for the ASPYIR planning tool is being able for a student to talk with their child study team in IEP meetings. So basically the answer is it is confidential, but you can decide to use it however you would like. So if that means it becomes easier to advocate for yourself in your IEP meeting and talk about the results in your IEP meetings, then by all means, use it for that. That is the primary reason it was made. But you can also use it in other ways. You could use it when you go on a new job and you have to remind yourself, gee, what were some of the accommodations I came up with that might make it more helpful and easier for me to do my best work in this new employment setting? Now, does that mean that you have to walk up and give it to your job coach or your boss? No, you could also keep it as your own personal guide and use it yourself. But again, if you wanted to make the decision on your own to share it with, let's say, a support coordinator, to show, for example, the section on independent living, where you've identified skills that you would like to practice and get better at, you can do that. It's really up to you how the information is used. But many people have conflicting ideas of whether or not they want to share it with more people or keep it to themselves. It is totally up to you.
Right now, the way that the ASPYIR tool is set up, the only email that's actually going to get the results is the email address that you or your child or your loved one put in for it to be delivered. It does not come to Disability Rights New Jersey. It does not go to any of the other state agencies or state organizations. So that's why we say it is a confidential tool that's only going to the person and the email address that they designate it to be delivered to. The next question that we have is, can I take the planning tool if I'm finishing high school and going right into work? What if I'm already done with school?
Great question. If you're already done with school, you can indeed take the planning tool, if you just want to focus on employment and independent living. It's still going to ask you questions about education, but the questions will be short and sweet, and your focus can be on the other two sections that better suit where you are at that time. So employment and independent living can be the focus.
And then the other question that we had received, and again, these are questions that we received before the meeting came in, is how do I use the planning tool results at an IEP meeting?
So the planning tool results are written in such a way that it becomes easier for the student to advocate for themselves at the IEP meeting. I would suggest going section by section and really identifying, okay, within education, here are my strengths. Here are the areas that I need to improve at. Here are the accommodations that I feel are best for me in an educational environment. And here's how I learn best. Here's what I need. Then moving on to the other sections related to employment and independent living. So my very roundabout answer is to follow the direction of the tool. Just go section by section.
And the last question that we received prior to the recording is, what do I do if there's not enough time left in the IEP meeting to discuss the ASPYIR report and transition planning?
You can always request a new meeting if you've run out of time. You are allowed to request another IEP meeting, and you can decide specifically what you would like to discuss at the meeting that you request. So don't be so afraid of running out of time. You will get the opportunity to ask for what you need.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the attendees today?
Jana,
Hello, Ms. Barb.
how you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. I wrote on here on the chat what RIGHT stands for. Stands for real individual of growing and helping themselves. And I want to mention about that we've been working on getting these younger generation to become involved in self-advocacy so they can learn how to be a good role model and how to be a good leaders and also to step up to the plate, because I've been in self-advocacy since the mid-80s when New Jersey started the movement. And that's what we been working on for a long time. We need to get them involved in self-advocacy.
Agreed. We definitely do. And if you would like more information about us, we do have our main address and our contact information up on the screen right now, but you can also follow us on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, and we are on YouTube. And we post a variety of resources and also will let you know about upcoming webinars, upcoming educational opportunities, and information that's happening with the Disability Rights Network, information that's happening in New Jersey, and things that you need to be aware of or things that are potentially coming down the line. So that way you're able to stay involved and help others know their rights as well. If there are no other questions at the time, just, okay, let me check the chat. Somebody says, thank you, so important. I'm sorry if I missed this. We're going to be posting this webinar on our Instagram, not on our Instagram. It's going to be on our website and it should also be on our YouTube as well. So that way this resource will be available for everybody to use as well. We're going to put our PowerPoint up so that way you have the information that was contained in it. If there are no further questions.
Oh, there is one other question. I just saw it.
Who do you contact for help with ASPYIR? For that, you contact Miss Jessie.
Yes, you are going to contact me if you need help with ASPYIR. And you can go through you can go through intake, and I think it's on the previous slide, Jenna. Intake's email, advocate@disabilityrightsnj.org, and specifically say that you would like help with the ASPYIR planning tool, and Intake will then be in touch with me. Also, thank you for putting that in the chat as well. But yes, you can ask me for help, and I will help you and yours directly, hopefully.
We'd like to thank everybody for being here and being part of our webinar, because this is important information and it's a great resource for people to use. And this ASPYIR tool that we launched, and this is a brand new initiative, it's been out for about a month, is really a great way for people to help strengthen their own self-advocacy skills and make sure that their voices and their needs are being heard. We thank you all for coming to our webinar. We hope you have a great day and have a very happy Thanksgiving.